Autumnal greetings. I'm Jonathan Crook, known for telling tales here and around in the Hudson Valley. But at this time of year, when things begin to get hauntingly colorful, maybe a spooky chill fills the air, you're in the mood for something spooky, something scary, and thus I tell the legend of Sleepy Hollow, Washington Irving's fall classic, about a galloping goblin chasing after Ichabod Crane. I'm going to have you visit now with someone who also brings autumn into a colorful light by carving intricate pumpkins. Jonas is a master not only of carving pumpkins, but of creating art that indeed reflects the beauty, the history, the hauntedness of the Hudson Valley.
The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, an abridged version by Jonathan Crook, adapted from Washington Irving. Along the quiet cove where the Hudson River dances into the Pocantico, there wandered an itinerant schoolmaster from Connecticut. Looking like a scarecrow who had escaped from his post with a pointy snipe of a nose, Ichabod Crane was aptly named. He took on the job of schoolmaster in Sleepy Hollow. Living for a couple of weeks at a time in each of his young scholars' homes, he brought learning and a gazette of gossip into the gloomy community. By day, he used the birch branch to urge tardy loiterers down the flowery path of knowledge. By night, he sought students with good cooks for moms, for he enjoyed the comforts of the cupboard. Above all, Sleepy Hollow is known for its ghost lore, and Ichabod found no story detail too gory to hear. Soon, the schoolmaster fell under two spells. First, the drowsy, dreamy air of Sleepy Hollow also enchanted Crane to sense spirits. The whole region abounds with haunted houses, haunted streams, bewitched barns and bridges. There appears in Sleepy Hollow the specter of Major Andre, the Revolutionary War spy, and one hears the moans of a mysterious woman in white, wailing before storms sweep across the Tappan Zee. The principal goblin and dominant spirit is that of a headless horseman. A cannonball carried away his head at an unnamed battle for independence, leaving a ghoulish ghost relentlessly seeking for what he lost. The farm wives frightened the schoolmaster with fireside tales of this specter whom they called the Galloping Hessian of Sleepy Hollow. The other spell beguiling Ichabod more than any ghost, goblin, or coven of witches, 'twas that of a coquettish woman. Katrina Van Tassel was a ripe, blooming lass, known not only for her beauty, but for the bounty anyone marrying her would inherit. She was the only daughter of Baltus Van Tassel, the most prosperous farmer in the hollow. Ichabod courted Katrina as her singing master. He rolled his eyes over all the Van Tassels' abundant wheat fields and fruit orchards, imagining, one day this will all be mine. The course, of course, to true love, as the bard said, is never straight. Ichabod's route to Katrina was more crooked than a barrel of eels. Standing between Crane and Katrina was a burly, roaring, roistering blade known as Brom Bones. A Herculean figure, he rode like a Cossack through the hollow and presented a ready rival to the scarecrow of a schoolmaster. Brom, though made more of mischief than malice, threatened to double up the schoolmaster and lay him on a shelf. A clever Crane never agreed to meet his challenger on the open field for a round of fisticuffs. Heavens, no. This forced Brawny Bones to turn to a charivari of tricks. He tried smoking Crane out of his school, set a witch web of booby traps. He trained a ridiculous dog to howl whenever Ichabod gave the Van Tassel heiress her singing lesson. Crane would not give up his suit for Katrina. Finally, things come to a head lest they'd go on this way for too long. The Van Tassels held an annual autumnal quilting frolic. Upon receiving the invitation, Ichabod cried, "School's dismissed!" Hair queued in an eelskin, neck stock and knee breeches, he got himself all gimmed up and borrowed for his nightly courting a sway-backed ornery plow horse named Gunpowder. Crane, with a love poem in his frock coat pocket, rode off to woo and win Katrina right after the ball. Again, passing by the Van Tassel farmstead, Ichabod imagined everything, complete with cooked ducks swimming to him in their own gravy, as all mine. The Sleepy Hollow folk, decked out in brass buttons and ribbons, sat down together for the feast. Ichabod, though exceedingly lank, had the dilating powers of an anaconda. He ate with the joy other men felt for a good smoke or a strong drink. When the ancient fiddler struck bow, the schoolmaster bounced onto the dance floor. Every part of his lanky frame moving, he jittered and figured like Saint Vitus, the patron of the dance. Why this jumping with joy? Why, his partner was the desired Katrina Van Tassel. The entire party watched and clapped and urged on Ichabod, while the great Brom Bones sulked. He was one of those men who believed dancing unmanly. When the tune ended, Brom set his plan to work. He flattered and cajoled the veterans into polishing up their old Revolutionary War stories. Tales of sword and cannon inevitably led to stories of Sleepy Hollow spirits. Talk turned to Farmer Brower, right after he claimed, "I'm a heretical disbeliever in ghosts." The galloping Hessian bashed his brains. Brom followed with a frightful tale of his remarkable race with the Headless Horseman. Ichabod gasped when learning, "The goblin rider vanished in a flash of fire. He cannot cross the bridge by the old Dutch church graveyard." "Goede Nacht all, good night all." Baltus Van Tassel broke up the revelry, and all merrily rode home. Ichabod approached Katrina like Romeo, but soon returned to Gunpowder, crestfallen. The coquette had led him on, only to send him away. The night along the Hudson looked as lonely as the rejected Master Crane. The forlorn schoolmaster felt the crickets and owls turn into spooks and spirits. Riding in fits and starts on the cantankerous horse, soon every blazed branch and forest creaking became an uncouth ghoul or the White Lady's ghost. Near the haunts of Wily Swamp, Andre's capture tree spooked Ichabod. Then he heard the plashy tramp of another traveler. "Who are you? Who are you?" he stammered, but received no reply. On mounting a rising ground, which brought the figure of his fellow traveler in relief against the sky, gigantic in height and muffled in a cloak. Ichabod was horror-struck on perceiving that he was headless. But his horror increased on observing that the head rested on the pommel of his saddle. A race against terror took off. If I can just make it to the bridge, thought the schoolmaster. The headless horseman cannot cross. Ichabod squeezed gunpowder so hard he broke off the saddle and almost popped out the horse's one good eye. Ha ha! Ichabod reached the church bridge first. He turned to assure himself of the galloping Hessian's fiery disappearance, and alas, he caught the goblin in the very act of hurling his ghastly head. Shh! Quack! A shattering encounter with Crane's cranium ended the night's haunting. The next morning, Hans von Ripper, Gunpowder's owner, found his horse grazing, but wondered, "Where is that scarecrow of a schoolmaster?" No school, yay, no schoolmaster, we've got no school. The school children had a holiday. The Dutch folk, however, made a startling find beneath the bridge. There, scattered on the banks of the Pacantico, they spied the remains of their poor pedagogue. There was a hat, a piece of poetry scribed, "To Katrina," and some cried, "Looky, 'tis Crane's brains." A few scoffed, "'Tis but pumpkin mash." No matter, Ichabod never again was seen in Sleepy Hollow. Now some claimed Crane had gone to the city and suffered a fate worse than being chased by a headless ghost. He had become a lawyer. Brom, of course, married Katrina, and always gave a knowing laugh whenever someone mentioned the pumpkin part of this tale. The wise Dutch farm wives, who know these matters best, insist. The galloping Hessian spirited Ichabod to his grave that night, and in the cove where his old schoolhouse once stood, not far from where the Headless Horseman lies, you can still hear the ghostly singing of Ichabod Crane.
We hope you enjoy this collaborative retelling of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Your voice gets me chills.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that, and I'm amazed at how intricate and beautiful your pumpkin carving is, as well as your artwork. So yeah, it was a fun collaboration. Glad to have played a part with you here.
And would you be so kind to share with the people where they can see you perform online or in person?
Yes, well, I'm spending all weekends in October telling the legend of Sleepy Hollow at Sunnyside, and I also have a driving tour telling of all the locations where you'll find something haunted pertaining to the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And you just have to go to my website, jonathancruck.com. Thank you. And happy Halloween.
Don't lose your head.